everyone, Alexandra here. So in this bonus lecture, which is available both in my course and on YouTube, we're going to discuss ways of scaling your freelance writing career. And I also have a Q&A session from, questions I often get from my mentees. Don't forget the full link to the course is in the description below. And if you use the link in the description, you can get the first month for free. This course will take you only a couple of hours, so you can, if you want to, just close your account after this. Now, usually I recommend a freelancing writing career as a go-to starting point if you want to enter a new industry or if you want to get started with a marketing role. So there's a bunch of opportunities to actually scale your freelance writing career. So the number one thing and the most common one is to go from a content writer to a content lead. So for instance, you can join a company in-house, start as either a contractor or as an in-house content writer, then scale to a content specialist or to an editor, and ultimately end up working as a content marketing lead or a VP of content. Then the second common option is to actually go from a writer to a marketer. So when you join a company as a writer, you will most of the time actually be part of the marketing team. So if you stick with that company for a couple of years, you can actually advance towards, getting more skills and becoming a demand generation marketer, a content marketing manager, a growth marketer, and so on. Now, something else to consider is whether you want to be in-house or maybe you just want to work as a contractor, so as a freelancer. There's also the option to do content writing part-time or as a side gig. So maybe you have your main job as a specialist in a field and you just want to do freelance writing on the side. Then there's obviously the option to become an author, so either for fiction or not necessarily, or a content creator. So for instance, in my case, I create courses, I am on YouTube, I'm on Instagram, I'm on LinkedIn. So there is a bunch of options and you can actually monetize these by selling resources, templates, courses, whatever actually. Then finally, what I always recommend is actually considering other careers, other roles, other industries. So if you maybe right now are passionate about travel, you can actually get started with, just writing about this. But if in time you want to, maybe you're just considering a different industry, maybe something in SaaS, like the project management industry or productivity tools or anything like that, there's always the option to actually scale towards this different type of niche essentially. And of course, you're not just limited to being a freelance writer or a marketer, because just being a writer is an amazing learning opportunity. So you can learn a lot about HR, about sales, about operations, even about software development and more technical topics. So in time, you might want to, start considering a separate career. Now, something that I cannot stress enough is to please, by all means, ideally right now, take a piece of paper and a pen and outline your career expectations. So for example, what I did was to think of every single role and maybe industry, maybe company that you want to work at every single year. So if this year you're going to start working as a freelance writer, maybe next year you want to be in-house, then in your third year you can be a content specialist, then move towards being a content manager, a content lead, and then maybe after 6-7 years, you can move into a more generalist marketing role, like a demand generation lead or growth marketing. And then ultimately in 10 plus years, maybe you want to be a marketing director or something like that. Now, since this course focuses a lot on how you can scale your career as well as your services, I have prepared a couple of questions that I often get from my mentees and that in general, as a freelance writer, you might want to know more about. So the first question is, how do I onboard new clients? So I did mention in this course that generally clients might want to have an onboarding session with their writers. So ideally, it's the client who comes forward to teach you about, how they do content, what their expectations are, how their product works. You might also need a couple of steps to go through with your client. So it can be reviewing the contract, reviewing any kind of guidelines that you might have for the way that you like to communicate. So it's best to always call up a meeting or at least go through some points so that your client can approve, your rate, again, the contract and any other guidelines you might have, potential penalties that might happen if they don't pay you on time, or it could just be like walking them through your writing process. So this is a must, telling them exactly kind of how you expect the collaboration to happen. So for instance, in my case, I would meet up with the client, then they would send me a topic and the guidelines. I would take a couple of days to go over the guidelines. And when I started working on the article, I would first send out either a brief or an outline, depending on whether they had this themselves or not. Then they would approve the outline. And then the next step was for me to work on the actual draft. So it was a lot of back and forth that just needed to be clarified during this onboarding process. Now, the next question is, should I add leads to my waiting list when I'm fully booked? So this is a big yes. So I have talked to a lot of content writers who didn't have time for extra work and they just said this, but they didn't add, in that case, my company to their wait list. This is a big no. So what I did instead when I was a freelance writer was to just let them know that my schedule right now was full, or I would sometimes take on like short pieces of writing, but not necessarily regular work. And so for regular articles, like 3 articles per month, I would just tell them that if it's okay, I'm going to add you to my waitlist and get back to you and then you would give them an estimate, like 3 months, 6 months, when something opens up. So essentially, you're maintaining this communication with them. So you're not just saying no to them, altogether. What do I do with leads that aren't a fit? So this happens often. In my case, for instance, I always took on clients in industries I was super familiar with because I wanted to be a subject matter expert at everything I was writing about, because this just makes your process easier. It's faster to write content. You put together much better content. You know where to get insights and so on. So if you have leads that aren't exactly a fit, don't just say you don't want to take that work on. You can, on one end, suggest maybe helping them with some services, like maybe putting together an editorial calendar or helping them with certain topics that they might tackle and those that are within your reach. Or you can actually help them find a writer. So look at the writers you network with, those you talk to that are maybe not your direct competitors. So it can be writers in a different niche, and you can refer clients to them essentially. And in return, they will also refer other clients to you if they are not a fit for them. What happens when invoice payments are late? So in the contract section of this course, I did mention that some writers do like to include penalties in the contract and on the invoice. So there's a couple of things you can do. In my case, I never had penalties. I would just, follow up with the client if they were late or sometimes they just forgot to make the payment. But another option is to include a penalty, so something like 0.5% for every day that they haven't made the payment, or it can be like $10 extra per month. To kind of avoid this issue, you definitely want a contract in place. I'm telling you, I've had situations where, to be fair, it wasn't like super often. I mean, it only happened like twice to me. So in one case, it was like I had to wait like 4 months to get paid, but I did have the contract. And I did understand the situation because my point of contact with that company had changed. So they were kind of restructuring their marketing. So, it's one, understanding the situation, and two, just following up with them and as much as possible having a contract in place. How do I project manage multiple clients at the same time? So again, I do recommend looking over my how to structure your work section in this course because it's relatively an easy process. It's really a matter of just, again, outlining your clients, the project, ideally kind of breaking down your work. So knowing that this week you're going to work on 3 articles for 3 different clients, or something I did was to take 1 week for one client. So for example, I would have 5 days to take care of 3 articles for the same client. And then the next week, I would work on 3 articles for another client and I would just deliver all of them in bulk. So this works amazingly if you have, a contract or some type of formal agreement with your client so that you deliver more articles during 1 month. So I had amazing clients who would give me a list of articles at the beginning of the month. I would take care of them and just deliver all of them at once. How do you deal with writing about things you're not an expert in? So, to be fair, I don't recommend this. I personally, again, I always wrote on topics I was confident with. So, topics where I had experience. Yes, you might be getting started in this career, or you might want to enter a new niche essentially. So, in this case, one, you'll need to take a bit of extra time to do the learning. So instead of giving a deadline of 1 week or 2 weeks, maybe make it 3 weeks to a month so that you can actually deliver a high quality piece without any mistakes in it. So generally, only take work in what's under your expertise. But if you are planning on entering a new niche, definitely add in a couple of extra weeks to do the research. I mean, what works best, honestly, if you're just kind of starting to write about a new topic, is to take a course as much as possible. There's a lot of free courses on any topics. There's, even just on Skillshare, essentially. So you can find even free articles that are kind of like guides to that topic that can give you, a better overlook of every detail essentially, because that's what you want. If you want to scale specifically, you need to really kind of grasp every detail of a topic. How many revisions should I include in my rates? So, for instance, I never mentioned this because, to be fair, it was almost always like 2 or 3 revisions maximum that the client needed. So what I would recommend when you're getting started is to actually include this in your contract. So usually you're going to want to mention something like 2, 3 revisions, definitely not more than 3 revisions, because what happens after that second or third revision round is that you risk having to rewrite that article. So as someone who didn't add the revisions in there, I had the situation once where I actually kind of had to rewrite the article because the client kind of changed their mind on their positioning. So after the first revision round, so it was still within these 3 rounds, I was basically asked to kind of, rephrase everything and change some things. So, that honestly sucks, but it's somehow part of the job. So that's why it's best to just clarify everything from the beginning. How do you manage seasonal changes? So honestly, this was my biggest challenge as a freelance writer. There's months like during the summer or December is often the worst one where, your point of contact with a company is on a holiday, or maybe they just don't want to put out that much content anymore during these months. So it's going to be a bit slower. So what you do at this point is you turn to your wait list of clients and you go to those people who've expressed interest in your services and ask them if they need some help during this time. Also, this is an amazing time, so these months specifically, to just take care of your personal brand, find a list of potential new clients. And personally, what I did was to look for clients that would need occasional work. So instead of, the 3 posts or however many per month, they would need like 1 post a month or 1 post every quarter or whatever. so that you always have these companies to turn to essentially. And also this time is your perfect chance to start a newsletter, start some courses, kind of, that's what I did. Essentially, that's how my courses started. I had a free break, let's say, in my schedule, so I started creating other types of content. Do I need formal educational training to become a writer? Now, the short answer is no, but most writers do have some form of education behind. So in my case, I do have like a master's degree and I do have like other types of training. So there's a lot of online courses, starting with this one to anything you can find on Skillshare. The HubSpot Academy has a couple of amazing courses for free if you want to get started in marketing. Also, you can just look for a topic on YouTube and look through a couple of the videos and webinars to get more experience with really understanding every aspect of content, of marketing, specific parts of marketing, whatever you are kind of looking to learn. Even though you are a freelance writer, you still need to maintain that, long-term learning essentially. So definitely take courses, talk to people. Like if you don't want to invest any money in this, it's still possible. There's free courses out there, free content. There's options to talk to experts in a field. So for example, I personally talk to, marketers that are like at the VP level, kind of where I want to get, so that I can kind of craft my career so that it's easy for me to get there by making use of their expertise. So for instance, my approach when I don't know how to do something is to go in a community or to my network to actually see how they did that thing themselves so that I have this like starting point. So this is like informal education. So really kind of to summarize this question, you do need some form of education, but it does not need to be formal. However, if you are already in college, so maybe, because I know a lot of writers who've done, for example, like chemistry and life sciences for their bachelor's degree, you can use that expertise to write about those topics. So it's definitely, an amazing starting point. Now, another question, do I have to pay to find work? Never. If somebody comes up to you and asks you to pay a certain sum of money to get leads or whatever, no. So finding clients is free. It shouldn't cost you anything. You should not pay yourself for anything. No one's answering my emails. What do I do? This is simple, but it's time consuming. So you just keep sending emails. So remember how in this course I told you to focus on having a list of prospects and keep updating that list of ideal companies. You definitely want to start writing to all of those. So send maybe, in my case, I would send like 50 emails a week, like during a single day. But in your case, it can be like 10 emails a day or whatever, up until you actually start getting 3, 4 clients. So one, always keep polishing your pitch. Again, there is a pitch template you can start with, but I definitely recommend customizing it. The pitch template is in this in the resources for this course. So always keep polishing that, and specifically make sure that it's customized for every company so that the samples are up to par with their expectations, the topics they write about. And then do follow up with all of the people you reach out to. To be fair, following up sometimes in this field is not like super effective. So you want to get creative. Like in my case, I would send videos instead of emails on LinkedIn as a kind of first interaction after a connection request. I would also kind of sometimes just ask a content manager if they needed help with content. So it's really diverse, if you will. You really need to experiment. But the point is, you're going to have, like, this is something I heard early in my career, and I was like, what? But it's so true. You have to send probably more than 100 emails, so 100 companies, to actually start getting some replies, because not everyone's looking for a freelance writer. Most people work with in-house writers. A lot of companies don't even want to focus on content, so it's tricky. How much can I realistically earn? However much you want, as long as you are willing to put in the time. So, like, super realistically speaking, anything above 30 to 40K is doable quite easily. When you want to scale beyond, let's say, 60K dollars, it takes a lot more time and, we're building your personal brand. Realistically, independently, like just you doing the writing work, you can get to 100K ish. That's kind of, the point to where I got. But beyond that, so beyond 100K, especially if you're still at the beginning to mid freelancing stage, beyond this stage, you want to maybe work with other freelance writers to scale your business. So in time, you might want to consider, doing some of the writing yourself and then having some other freelance writers you work with to kind of, keep up with the demand. You might want to start a small agency, a small studio. It's really up to you. What do you need to know about a project before you start writing? So, the very first thing is just clarifying everything that's in the contract. So, the rates, expectations, communication type, and so on. And then, specifically about a project, in the most ideal situation, you would get a brief. So, that brief would include everything from keywords that you need to include to the goal of the post to resources you can use to competing pieces they want to beat and so on. So the more detailed the brief, the better. But in a lot of situations, the client will just give you a topic or a keyword and you have to put together everything. Nevertheless, something you should clarify is exactly kind of what the goal of the content strategy overall is. And specifically when you get a topic, do make sure you clarify what they want out of that topic. So out of that specific keyword. Do they want product-led content? Do they just want to rank? Is it maybe just like for thought leadership purposes and so on? Second, because in some situations this is possible, try to make use of the resources the company has, from designers to internal experts. So, for instance, I had a client where I would reach out to some of their sales leaders to get quotes for a piece and to clarify a topic that was a bit controversial. So, you're not necessarily alone in this, even though you are a freelance writer. Should I promote my work on socials and my website? Definitely. Definitely, especially, and I mean, if you are going to be ghostwriting an article, nobody's going to allow you to share that content. But if you do get a byline, so if you have that author name next to the post, you definitely want to promote this work because it's in your best interest, because the more people see your article, the more people that you will get as, prospects, and just getting that exposure over your articles is ultimately what matters, no matter who is promoting the post. Also, keep in mind sometimes there's clients who directly demand that you promote that article. So it's a bit tricky. Like, you want to promote that article because you want to, not because somebody else says so. So it really depends on whether you like the company, whether you are actually willing to promote every piece. Should I partner up with other freelance writers? Definitely. So this is what I mentioned during the personal branding lecture. You definitely want to keep networking with other freelance writers and to exchange clients, exchange workloads. It depends. Like, sometimes you won't have time to do all of the writing for one client, so you might need to turn to, one of your freelancing best friends. So definitely partner up with them. Plus, a lot of freelance writers have different projects like newsletters, podcasts, different types of events that you can participate in. How do I demonstrate expertise, knowledge in a field? So again, if you are going to be writing as a subject matter expert on a topic you are super familiar with, some of the ways essentially in which you can do this is, one, either have formal education, some formal type of training, or maybe you've just written on that specific topic quite a lot. So this is the most common situation. If somebody wants you to demonstrate your expertise, just send them some of your best pieces as samples. Some other things you can do are obviously talk about your expertise and about the things you know during a first call with a potential client. And moving over to the personal branding side of things, one of the most efficient ways of getting prospects without doing, the manual reaching out is to actively talk about certain topics. So, for instance, I talk a lot about marketing and even productivity and project management. And especially when I was working as a freelance writer, I would talk about the topics I wrote about on LinkedIn, on Twitter. You also want to do some guest posting, and the bigger websites you can get, the better you can showcase your expertise. Now for the final question, how do I scale from 60K to 100K? So again, it's what I already mentioned. It's a matter of really being willing to spend a full-time amount, so 40 hours per week, to actually dedicating that to writing, as well as, to keep pitching clients. So for instance, in my case, I had roughly 5, 6 regular clients, but I also had a lot of other types of work, like editorial calendars, marketing consultancy, briefs that I had to put together, calls with, just consulting with startups and so on. So all of these one time, which sometimes turn into regular work essentially, all of these efforts do kind of add up. So you definitely want to consider, again, doing more than just writing. So I talked about this in the course. You want to extend your services, expand them so you do writing, editing, brief creation, editorial calendars, other types of marketing services like SEO, email marketing, and so on. Plus, as much as possible, try to get some passive income. So to be fair, part of my earnings were passive income. To be fair, again, passive income is not always just passive. So when I'm creating these courses, I'm putting a lot of time into these. So you are still working hard for that money essentially. The second really option to kind of scale to earn more than 100K is to, again, start working with other freelance writers who can kind of help you scale. Maybe start an agency, a small studio. But I would say the most effective thing if you don't want to work with others is to actually take a part-time job. For example, in my case, I would have a part-time job for 3 months or something like that. Like the most I've had was for 6 months. So 3 months, 6 months, you can even do a year if you want to. So this will bring you, depending on your expertise, the income you want on a regular basis. So for example, at some point I was charging 4K for part-time work, but I did have a lot of expertise in that field, so that's how I was able to get that rate essentially. And besides that, I was also doing writing. So for me, this was super easy to scale to 10K a month essentially. Now, another thing you can do to actually scale your business is to obviously focus on your writing skills. And I've talked about this a lot in this course. And I have some other courses that actually teach you how to become better at SEO writing, how to do keyword research, how to just provide amazing and unique content, because all clients are looking for this. There's still companies that want, the basic content just to populate your blog, but the companies that pay more money for the same amount of time that you would spend working for a company that doesn't pay you that much. So these higher paying companies, they want you to provide actual quality, unique content, anything that can help them stand out essentially. Looking ahead at the future, kind of what you should do after this course is definitely, again, go through the project of the course and then start polishing your writing skills. Again, I do have some courses that you can take under my Skillshare profile. So if you have other questions, because it's super important just write to me or leave a comment, and I will get back to you as soon as possible. Enjoy the rest of your day, and I will see you in some of the next courses.